We need to preserve Test cricket as it is the best form of cricket. You've heard words of this type in some variation or the other from a lot of people, whether it be former players, current players, administrators, commentators, even the people who are taking the calls as far as governing of the game. You've heard similar words from a lot of people, but what people say and what people do oftentimes tends to be very, very different. You remember that you've seen more often than not certain teams taking part in the World Test Championship only playing the minimum number of series and minimum number of tests required to constitute a World Test Championship cycle series. It does tend to happen. You've seen South Africa do it. Up to the last year, even Sri Lanka were just playing about the bare minimum number of tests needed. In case you're wondering what the bare minimum is, then it means you need to be playing at least 3 home and 3 away series, and they need to be a bare minimum of 2 test matches. However, even the bare minimum of 2 test matches doesn't really seem very safe when you consider that Cricket South Africa, in their next away test series, which will be taking place against New Zealand, have sent what is essentially a B side of test players. Reason being, all of their big players will be taking part in the SA20, their nascent T20 league. It talks the talk as far as you can say that, safe test cricket is the best format. But when it comes to walking the walk, you do see a lot of boards prioritizing T20 cricket for one very simple reason: the revenue. So what exactly do you think can be done when it comes to being able to preserve test cricket as a whole? Well, Cricket Australia chief Nick Hockley has a very interesting suggestion. It's one he discussed recently in a little bit of detail. He said that the preference is that a WTC cycle test must constitute a minimum of 3 test series. He said, I do think there is work to be done on that FTP going forward. It's about cementing the World Test Championship. This part's key. That last sentence, it's about cementing the World Test Championship. So when you are making every test series bare minimum 3 tests, then you're adding the number of test matches that are being played around the world, but it's also adding more gravitas and more context to every series. Again, India-South Africa was a great series, albeit a short one, but how nice would it have been to have a deciding test match instead of just having both teams share the spoils at 1 apiece for what was a 2-test series. Not the best advertisement for the sport, even though some of the action you got to see was absolutely riveting. So it's a good point that is being made by Nick Hockley in this case. And in fact, he does sympathize with the fact that, it isn't that easy for a lot of boards to prioritize test cricket. The reasons being, of course, financial. He said very correctly, he said that test cricket is thriving in certain countries, but it's a bit of a 2-speed economy. We must continue to support countries that are struggling in test. Now, when he says 2-speed economy, what he's referring to is the fact, and he name-checked here very specifically, he's saying that test cricket you see flourishes in countries like Australia, India and England. He's saying there you do tend to get consistent test cricket that is played, and you have good attendance for it, the TV ratings are good, everything is hunky-dory. He's saying, but it's a bit of a 2-speed economy because a lot of nations do tend to have good cricketing crowds come, but only for white ball cricket. What's more, the cost of putting on a test match can be a little prohibitive, little expensive for certain boards, and that's why he said we need to continue to support countries that are struggling in test cricket. So it's not just a case of disparaging nations who are choosing to prioritize T20. They said very clearly that, look, you need to be supporting these countries. In fact, he goes further and says that T20s are actually beneficial to the sport as a whole, because he says the role of T20s in bringing new people into the game can't be underestimated. But the belief is that tests and T20s can and should coexist. That's the key word. They need to coexist. It doesn't need to be one eats the other. It doesn't need to be that you're prioritizing one over the other. You need to prioritize both, potentially bring in money from T20s, invest it back into tests. Interesting theory, at least in theory. It's something that you have seen certain boards execute very well. India have done it. They bring in a lot of money from T20 cricket, the IPL, and they've reinvested it into the grassroots. Can other countries do it? It's a bit of a long-term game, but definitely some interesting suggestions from Cricket Australia's chief. But what are your thoughts on it? Well, you can let us know that in the comments, and don't forget, like, share, subscribe, tap that bell icon as well. Follow us also on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Also, don't forget to download the SportsTak app, and if you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos we've done as well. For now, from my side though, it's goodbye.